Whoa, it's me. Yep, there again. So I was thinking about the analogies. Uh, well, snake, stick really, but looked like a snake for a minute. Anyway, weather is just kind of bizarre. Looks very ominous, but there's nothing on the radar. Whether that means something, I guess I'll sue the radar if I get struck by something. Anyway, so yeah, you have these ways of metaphors and analogies using these examples of other things to illustrate a circumstance, a problem, whatever. And so I've used this one of the Frankenstein analogy, which most particularly points out the futility of not fighting the system, but also just points out the gross nature of creation. Then there's this speeding to a fire kind of analogy that when you're on a rescue mission, it's okay to speed, but when you're just going to the movies, it's not okay to speed. And we understand those difference in assigned risk or acceptable risk. So there's some behavior where you can fail, and there's some behaviors where you're really not allowed to fail. Where there's a zero tolerance policy in place. And again, the frivolous notion in your head that having a baby is a good idea is not something you can justifiably fail at, in my opinion. Certainly, I don't think it's reasonable. So the analogy of the speeding, reckless asshole sort of illustrates that. Then you have the analogy of the amusement park or restaurant or some other thing where it acknowledges the fact that we're in this together. You can't pretend that you can extract lucky from reality and just do the lucky thing. No, you can't. You have to accept that for every time you step into one of those risk equations, if you play the game, if you play Vegas, you're basically endorsing, you're accepting the failures of Vegas. You're subsidizing it. So even if you think you're winning, you didn't win anything because you just basically kicked somebody else in the nuts and dumped them on the side of the road. Because failure is inevitable. So that's, or the amusement park kind of way of looking at it where, you all want to go play a little fun game, and a minority, but nonetheless a real minority, the real people, will have a horrible, awful time. You have full knowledge of it going in, and you're basically just saying, fuck you to your victims. And there's nothing else happening here. There's no other way to describe the reality than to say that's exactly what people are doing. They're basically saying, I'm having a good time, I want to have a good time, and I really don't care if it makes him sick. And that's how it's bogus. And then another one would be this nest building idea, which I'll talk about just because it sort of relates to expectations, which is an interesting word. So, this idea that, if I described to you the behavior of a cuckoo bird and said, well, yeah, it just basically finds some other bird's nest that they worked hard to build, knocks the eggs out, and lays its own egg in there instead, and fools the not too bright little birds into basically raising its fucking monster. Now you'd say, gee, that sucks. But isn't that what everybody on welfare is doing, or anybody who really doesn't financing their own reproduction doing? They're basically telling other people, go to work to subsidize my reproduction. Slave and toil, pay your property taxes, which are 80% subsidized for child bearers. So I, can lay eggs basically on your head and force you to subsidize my notion of accomplishment. It's all sort of, that's just, like I said, welfare is outrageously bogus, but even the average child bearer isn't saying, I wish to take full responsibility for my reproductive choice, and I shall pay for its education, and I shall pay for its health care and its welfare, and I will not bother the people who choose not to have children. I won't steal their money. I won't force them into the labor camp to pay for my whatever, my notion of accomplishment. That's what they're doing, clearly, plainly, and wide open, right in the open. They're just forcing people like me, or others would be maybe a better example. But yeah, they're forcing them to have to live in this world and obey certain rules to finance and provide for the welfare of their children. Even, I'm not allowed to walk naked through this woods because of their children. That's it. Otherwise there wouldn't be much reason to say somebody can't. And so again, I think about all the things that are put into society, all the limitations on our freedom, and they only exist because children might be exposed. So again, it's somehow your decision is now my decision. Why do I have to live with your decision? That's part of this. But what I want to get to is the expectation part of it too. Just as this idea of what is a nest. So I think it's already obvious that these birds aren't doing the necessary work to take full responsibility for their choice. But beyond that, what's their expectation? They must realize that they're not going to have them. Them isn't going to be produced by them. They must see the other people have kids that aren't anything like the parents. They must know that's the way it works. That maybe your kid isn't going to like the shit that you like. And so why would you have this expectation that a world so very messy and sloppy and full of inequities and cruelties and nastiness, why would you have this expectation that because you fell for it, because you bought the Brooklyn Bridge, your kid's going to buy it, your kid's going to fall for it? Especially these theists who have no real confidence in their theism. And you just wonder, do you think your kid's going to do the same silly thing? Oh yes, I'll just talk God-like, but I don't believe any of it. So you're going to raise your kid to be a hypocrite on purpose? With that as the expectation? I hope he turns into a hypocrite, and doesn't really believe, because those people are crazy. But I don't want him not to believe, because those people are crazy. So yeah, do you have the expectation that your child will grow up to be a hypocrite? Like you, a fake, a phony, a fraud? How many of these people have great lives, great health, great anything? And these aren't spectacular example people. They're people who have all kinds of flaws, all kinds of deficits. And they're basically saying, I expect my child to be perfectly satisfied being a frump. Yeah, well, fuck you. I'm not satisfied to be a frump. No sale, bitch. And that's just nasty to think I'm going to be as dumb as you. Isn't that what it comes down to too? These people can't imagine that their child might be smarter than them and might say, "Ooh, I need a richer diet. I need more from life than going oochie goochie goo to a baby, or watching the lottery on TV." Yeah, no, I need a hell of a lot more than that. How did you think that was going to feed me? So they want their kids dumber and more hypocritical than themselves would be the expectation, I suspect. Nothing else seems reasonable. If they had a reasonable expectation that their child is going to grow up in a world that has more information in it, more facts and figures, and more hard knocks available for viewing. It's just more cynical with each passing year. What's the expectation? How is this a reasonable expectation? What's not a reasonable expectation? So again, just indicates that this decision has nothing to do with being reasonable, being responsible, being mature, being accountable. and has everything to do with all the opposites of that, which is unaccountability, irrationality, greed, gluttony, piggery, slobbery, laziness, nonsense. But anyways, the point isn't for me to sit there and ridicule. But the point is for me to say, look, you can figure this out all kinds of different ways. That this life game isn't a game. It's not just play money. There's real blood in the world. There's real horrors in the world. And yes, most of the horrors don't jump out and say hi to you because they're miserable and they're cowering in their cardboard box. So yeah, they're not in your face, but they don't get here any other way than through people like you making the choice to bring them here, to force them into the box. And that's what's going to happen. There's real probabilistic equations here. There's no surprise it came out deformed. No, that's what happens. A certain number will come out that way. We know it. And there's nothing in your hope to give you justification to think you're immune to being the producer. And if you have been lucky, that's all you've been, is lucky. Doesn't mean your decision was rational. Don't go defending it to other people and saying it was the right thing to do, it worked for me. What the fuck? Because you're the sole survivor of a, I don't know, name any kind of catastrophe, any kind of poisoning even, any kind of sloppiness. Because you survived, you're going to just deny the irrationality of putting somebody in the same jeopardy? I mean, please. So much irrationality. So, generally speaking, like I said, I think the arguments are there, right there to have through these simple analogies of if you saw a bird do it, you'd know it was dumb. Even if you saw somebody else doing it, just slightly different, you don't have to change the dimension of the decision much to realize what it is, to see it for what it is, that it's just not acceptable, it's not reasonable. There's no rational excuse. You can't keep justifying what you're imposing. And I mean, that's the key element here. It's this whole idea of recognizing that you're not living in isolation, especially when you're creating life. That's not living an isolated life, an insulated life, a life where you can claim, I didn't do it. You can't claim, I didn't do it. And, so many people are, if they don't directly cause something, they don't take any responsibility. And that's so bogus too, because we're all feeding it. You can't separate yourself from your function as part of it. It's like if you're an American, you got to take responsibility for the wars, even if you voted against them. They're still made possible by your industry, your participation, you're playing the game. Yes, you have less accountability, less responsibility, but your responsibility doesn't just go away because you say, I didn't do it. Because in a way, you feed it. In some way, you assist it. I mean, you got to almost argue, if you don't go to war against the Nazis, wouldn't we basically be an ally of the Nazis? I mean, you only had the two choices. I mean, you're either right or you're wrong. I mean, you either do the right thing or you do the wrong thing. That's not the best way to put it. But there's no way of getting around the fact that if you don't do what you can do, and there's a huge difference in outcomes between what you can do and you doing nothing, then fuck, there's no other word, then it's your fault, because you didn't do what you could do. just the truth. And if the economics are there, whether you like it or not, whether you want the guilt or not, whether you want to feel it or not, it's just the truth. That you took, and period. And we all, like I said, we all do it. We're all flawed in the sense that we don't live rationally. It's hard to live rationally because we're needers. And the need inside of us is so immediate. And the need external to us, is so hard to truly feel. All you can do is imagine and try to empathize. But empathy is a thin replacement for the reality of having, being, experiencing. It's really not quite the same thing. So let's not pretend. But again, admitting your flaws is the first step, and then recognizing that sometimes you need mechanisms that impose discipline because you're just too addicted, too corruptible, and that you need accountability to exist, because if it doesn't exist, you might steal the candy. You just might. Because it's the nature of the selfish animal to take the extra banana if no one's looking. Quit making excuses and demand accountability. Say yay to accountability, even when it imposes some discipline on yourself, because you've got to know it's for the best. We've got to endorse rational human behavior, not irrational, selfish, and highly destructive behavior. Highly reckless, sloppy, mess-making behavior. Unnecessary messes, I will add. Anyway, I believe I've completed the video portion of the video. So now you can have the non-video portion. The non-existent portion begins now. So it's going to be highly invisible and highly inaccessible to you with current technology. So, see you on the other side. Alright, I'll throw on a little extra. Yeah. Walk home. Lovely day, really. Breezy. But charming and such. Anyway, so Fred made a video. Doing this living life to the fullest thing. A theme brought up kind of by Ante Cantabad. And, this whole ambition thing is kind of a, who knows, kind of a fraud kind of a thing. Because in many ways you can live vicariously a very rich life in a sense. You can read stories. It can be quite a nice adventure. Certainly movies and other media can take you places, and it's quite adequate, I find. I mean, I've been to the Grand Canyon, but frankly, a nice video from a helicopter, blah, 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 is probably in some ways, let's say it that way, in some ways is a richer experience than the on-the-ground kind of thing, the limited vision thing. So in some ways, our ability to do things, not firsthand, secondhand, do I really need to jump out of an airplane? I don't think so. And especially when you come to people like, it's more like just doing these dairy things. They dare themselves to do it essentially, and then just use it as a badge of dare honor or something. Some of these things can be called just plainly immature. I don't think we have to say there's great glory in stupidity. I mean, I could ride a motorcycle and stand on the seat of the motorcycle and let go and, have that wonderful little bold adventuring. But really, I can swing from a swing, get the same sensations. So it's all just a head game in the end. That's all we're playing is a head game. And that's where the whole life thing just spirals into the trap of, making it seem all so obvious. But that's all it is. It is you're just playing a game with your head, your brain, your expectations, your wants, your desires. And it certainly is kind of bold of you to assume that what you want and what you desire and what you need and what you feed on is something you can expect from the next generation. It's really a silly expectation. They'd find it just as rewarding for the 2 minutes of glory. Again, this all comes at huge risk and huge expense, and nobody wants to calculate all that out and figure out just how much of, all the unnecessary pain and suffering in the world is exactly that, just completely unnecessary. So people can have 2 minutes of glory or 5 minutes of this or 15 minutes of that. It is just quite silly just to gain some sort of idea in the head saying, oh, I did it, I accomplished it, I had it, it's now a memory. Wow. I can make those up. I really can. I can just make up a memory if I want to. I had dinner with Bugs Bunny. There, I'm making it up. Went to his mansion and we went on his yacht. Had a lovely interrupted by horse folk. Yeah, horse folk. They're a little dim, I think they take a few hooves to the head and such. Anyway, where was I? We'll just finish up. So anyway, again, you always have to figure out the ambition here. What's the game being played? And, the Frankenstein model illustrates it. This stupid, idiotic notion that you're going to use Frankenstein as a laboratory experiment to see if you can conquer something that probably best not conquered. And to all these other analogies and metaphors just point out that, life is a frivolous adventure with real expensive casualties. Bears. 4 or 5 of them just ran there. Might be dressed as steers. I don't know. You never know about bears. Anyway, this looks like real bear kind of territory here. So anyway. Alright, that's really enough. Sorry. Shouldn't just ramble on. Yeah, shouldn't. So I will just try to resist the temptation. So till the next time. This is the worst of the tree area here. Almost have a tree in the face. It's just, they're just everywhere. There's like 7 trees in a row here. Must be forged. Or whatever. Alright, really, sorry. Done. Completed. So, till next time and such. So forth and whatnot.